Good morning. My name is Jason. I'm the landscape manager here. And so we're just going to have a landscape general design class. Landscape design gets pretty in-depth, so we'll try to keep it as concise as we can because there's a lot of information. You could always go deeper and deeper about different things with landscape. But it's kind of a fun thing to deal with, and you can learn a lot, but at least I can give you some place to start. Landscape is a pretty cool thing because landscape in general is an art form, and it's living and it's growing. So it's always going to be changing, and you can change things with it. One of my favorite parts with landscape is that landscape, when we do landscape jobs or even your own house, it's unique to you. So when we do different jobs and do different ideas, nothing's cookie cutter for us. Everything's ever changing, so my job is ever changing. So it's a pretty neat thing. But when you're considering landscape design or landscape form, what is your purpose? When you look at your house or you look at your property, what is your purpose? What are your wants? What are your needs? What is your intent? What do you want to do? Maybe you want to work on your front yard. Maybe you want to work on your backyard. Maybe you just want to screen the neighbors or screen the noise of the highway, whatever it is. So you really have to consider what your purpose is up front, because you don't want to get a little bit too off task and maybe start with one thing first, move on to something else, but at least knowing that. A lot of people, their purpose is going to be beauty. They just want to add beauty. Some people want to do resale value, privacy, but if beauty is the number one thing, you got it, dude. We can take care of it. So you want to weigh your needs and your wants, and once you've got that and you kind of know your area, we'll call your area your canvas. And your canvas is, you have to know your canvas. So whether you've got some windows that you don't want to block, or you don't want to block a driveway, a sidewalk, whatever it is, you have to consider those things. But also with your canvas, you want to consider your environment. When you're considering your environment, that means we have a hardiness zone around here, and that hardiness zone is a 7B to an 8A, meaning that we get, in the winter times, we get down usually to 10 to 15 degrees at coldest. Now, the last two winters have been kind of a offset of that. We've had extremes, but in general, those are our hardiness zones. You also want to know, in your canvas area, your space, sun versus shade, how much sunlight you get, how much daylight you get. I mean, it can, and that can change throughout the year. The angle of the sun might change in spring versus in winter. So you really want to consider, because a lot of your plant material is going to want more sun. Some of it's going to want shade. You also have to consider with your environment, your soil constructs. If you live locally to here, it's a lot of clay soils. It's a lot of rock. It's a lot of alkaline soils, while a lot of your plant material to thrive wants an acidic, sandy soil. So you really have to consider that as well. And of course, when you dive into that deeper, that goes into bed prep. And that's kind of like a whole class by itself. Max usually covers that really well in the spring with some of his courses on bed prep and excavating some of your soil, bring in some nutritious soil. So if you're going to consider that, that's a really good place to start. You also want to consider wind, how things are going to be flowing through your yard. And then I guess even with your canvas, you want to consider things that are existing. If you've got existing plants in that area or existing trees, how you're going to work around them. Or if you want to take it out and you're going to cut it out, then that's what you're going to do. You really have to consider those things when you start. Sometimes your canvas might even extend beyond your yard, that if you've got neighbors and you want to screen them, or if you've got noise that's in the next neighboring property, that is still considered kind of your canvas, that you want to block your neighbors, you want to block, just this one window at your neighbor's house, whatever it is. So that's a good consideration when you're talking about your space and your canvas. Also, I guess you have to consider, do you have kids or grandkids that come over and play in the area that you're going to be landscaping? And are they going to be, I don't want to put something in super delicate if they're going to kick a ball into it or whatever it is. Same thing with pets. A lot of plants like to make trails in yards, so you have to consider that as well when you talk about your landscape space and your landscape canvas. So once you examined all that, and you really picked your space, you have to develop the area for maximum use and maximum pleasure for yourself while being practical. I think that's my main focus as a designer, is what's practical. We want to make sure that the plant material that you're using is going to work practically for the area, because I think everybody's goal is to only have to do landscape once. That you don't want to have to re-landscape because you made an oops. You know, it's not a perfect science, but you don't want to have to redo it again. So you really kind of have to be practical when it comes down to it. So once you kind of figured out your area, then you can really start considering plant selection. And obviously there's a lot of plants, and I would hope maybe somebody's done their research. You can always do reading research. I'm so happy people have come up here, because Fossil Creek is kind of your own research development area. There's lots of plants here, and obviously we carry things that work for North Texas and in this area. So once you research that, you can come up here and start making decisions. And just depending on the areas you want to do, whether you want to do screening or new landscape beds, you can start from the top and start at your biggest stuff. So your shade trees, your large trees, that's going to be your oaks and your elms and your pistache. And those are going to be the best if you're going to, for maybe farther out in the yard. I would not plant shade trees any closer to the house than 15, maybe 12 foot. Those need to be farther out, and it's not just an aspect of the roots for your foundation and keeping them away. It's the fact of, yes, I want shade, but I don't want these branches scratching on the top of my house. I don't want my roof to get beat up. I don't want branches to fall on my house. So you have to be very considerate when you consider shade trees that are going to be larger than 20, 30, 40 foot tall. Then you can work your way down from there and talk about ornamental trees. When I talk about ornamental trees, I like to consider ones that stay under 25, 20 foot, somewhere in there. So that's going to be crepe myrtles, little gem magnolias. These are more your specimen features. They're going to be more flowering, sometimes hollies. These you can place more towards the home or around structures, but you still want to keep them 4 to 5 foot away from the foundation. Not that their roots are going to get under the foundation and affect your foundation. It's more of an aspect of, I wouldn't want this scraping against my house, my windows, or as it gets up to 15 foot, now it's scraping my gutters. A windy night, it's banging on the gutters and now keeping me awake. Because the less I have to trim, the better. It's better for the plants, and it's better for me. Or you can consider screening trees as well, which could be hollies, junipers, wax myrtles, all those upright kind of Christmas tree shaped things. Those are a lot better for your screening, or if you want to use them as anchoring for your landscape as well, that's always a great choice. Then you work your way down from there and you start talking about shrubs, medium-sized shrubs, whether they're evergreen or deciduous. Evergreen meaning they keep their leaves, most of their leaves, year-round, and then you want your deciduous shrubs, which are going to drop their leaves in the winter, but probably have a really nice flowering season and be a good touch of color. So then you're going to start, whatever your landscape area is, you can start talking about layering and contrasting and how you want to space those in. Sometimes it's easier with a blank canvas, but sometimes you want to keep things that you have existing, and that's okay. But you want to probably start with your evergreen shrubs as your baseline shrubs. This means that first layer, which is causing your evergreen kind of palette as a background. And this could include some of these sunshine ligustrums or boxwoods. There's hollies out there. There's Indian hawthorns. A lot of the evergreen items, which are going to just set your base for the rest of your landscape. Then you can start staggering in either if you've got enough room in the bed, other layers of evergreen shrubs as a kind of basis for that. Sometimes, I guess when you talk about long landscapes against fences or at your home, if you want to consider kind of a mirror image option, which means if I put X amount of boxwoods on this side, maybe on the other side of the house I do the same thing. This will cause a lot of continuity across your landscape without just being a cluster of something and something else. It's nice to have continuity It doesn't necessarily have to be the same shrub all the way across because, again, you don't want to get too monotonous either. You don't want it to be same old holly that everybody has all the way across. But if you have pockets of different landscape items, that's great. And then once you start layering those factors in, of course, I kind of have some options here when we talk about evergreen shrubs and how they fit in. I don't know if this is going to block my face. I hope not. And how you layer those items in. You can consider a lot of the colors and textures. Of course, these are two evergreen options. This is a yew and this is an andina. So you've got two different colors here, two different textures. So this yew might be your background layer that's evergreen, and this is going to be a darker green. And then in front of that, you're going to have more of this. This is a blush pink, so it's going to be more of that orange color, pink color, especially in the fall. And so even in the wintertime, you're still going to have these colors. Once you start setting this base of evergreens, you can place in the pockets of other deciduous shrubs like this. This is a dwarf crepe myrtle. And when you place these in, you can place them in certain pockets just for that pop of color, especially when you talk about summer color, spring color. These are great options to have. This isn't necessarily something you want to just put all across the front of the landscape, even though you might think it looks nice to have the same flower. You still want to break it up with different colors and different options because you have to realize this is going to go dormant in the winter and it's going to be naked, not have any leaves, and then you're going to be like, well, what do I do now? So you still want to mix in plenty of the evergreen, and there's lots of options, but again, just know your canvas and make sure you're placing in things that will work in sun, shade, soil, whatever you happen to have. Then once you get beyond the base shrubs, you can consider more your perennials, your annual color. These are lantanas and catyralias. And of course on this side we've got more your salvias and your, this is skullcap here in the front. So most of your perennials, of course they're all going to go dormant in the winter and then come back out. Those are your perennials. And then you've got annuals, which we have a large annual section. The annuals are going to have to be replaced, if not yearly, maybe more than once just for each season. But this is when you could also start filling in pockets with different colors. So if you've got an entryway, if you've got a corner area that you really want to make sparkle with a lot of color, this is a good way to do it. So you'll be staggering in maybe some different colors. I've got blues with orange, yellows, whatever kind of color you see here. And then some pinks, same here we've got some lantana, and then in front of that, we've got some purples / blue, whatever you want to call that. And a lot of times as landscape designers, we have a tendency to use odd number of plants. You'll see that a lot, and that helps us a lot of times fit into irregular spaces. Like if you see here, I've got 5 plants, so they kind of zigzag instead of course, we're not big proponents of straight lines either. That's everybody's different flavor. But we like to stagger and we like to use odd numbers because of the irregularity, and then it also helps with flow. We've noticed that the odd numbers and the staggering, when you're talking about open spaces, has a lot more flow to it. Now that doesn't mean you can't use even numbers. A lot of times you have to really consider your space, but it's good to use those principles like that. If you do like the straight line look, that's perfectly fine. With the staggering, we just see that it flows a lot more, and then if I did a straight line, a lot of times it just makes one layer and then the next layer, so your eyes aren't flowing as well. You're just seeing like a straight line layer and then stair stepping down and do another straight line layer. So unless you're looking for that more extreme formal line of landscape, which is a little bit more old school, or if you have that modern look. And I would say the majority of Texas landscapes are more that southwest free-flowing feel. Even if you don't think it's southwest, it just kind of fits in because a lot of the plant material we use isn't one that you're going to box off every time. It's going to be something that's more free-flowing. Plus that boxing off always includes more maintenance for yourself, and everyone's always looking for less maintenance. Also within these landscapes, I went over the smaller stuff. When you start using the larger stuff, like the crepe myrtles or the magnolias, these are more your anchoring trees. That means when you come to the end of the house at the corners and you're bringing them 4 to 5 foot off the corners, they're anchors because it's framing off your house, and it's framing off your property. So everything doesn't feel so short just all the way across. You're framing that off. Some people like to do these also if your house has a big enough space across the front. You're anchoring either the front door, maybe you're anchoring entryways to your driveway. A lot of people will use the junipers or the hollies that are more upright. A lot of times it's just more inviting, to showing that there is an entryway there, or this is a main focus. And this is always a great pop of color on the corners. Obviously, crepe myrtles are a great option for this area. Magnolias get a flower as well. So that's always a great option to have those anchors and those larger options. You can also, when we talk about layering, if you kind of want to one-up it from there, you can talk about landscaping for different seasons, which means you're going to have different flowering season and different options. So when we start at the very beginning of the year, February, March, you'll have trees that flower out in a season all on their own. So if you want to have some ornamental trees, red buds, flowering peach trees, I think there's some forsythias out there. All of these are going to be very early bloomers. So when you talk about February going into March, those are a great option. And I think here every year when we get February and the red buds bloom out, everybody goes, "What's that? I want that. It's the only thing blooming right now." And that's one of the best options to use for that time of year. As you move into early spring, so as you go into March into April, you'll have a lot of the evergreens that will flower. Indian hawthorns and loropetalums. This is when your bulbs start coming up and blooming out, your daffodils. So that's always a great option for early spring. I think you've even got some viburnums that'll start blooming out. Then you jump into big spring. And big spring is probably the biggest time for bloomers. All of your yuccas and agaves, all your perennials will start blooming out a little bit. Hydrangeas, that's a big season for hydrangeas and azaleas. So if you want to space those out across your landscape to always have a pop of color in each season, this is a great place to start. Now, depending on what North Texas weather does, on whether we jump from big spring to hot summer just like now, that's your big consideration now. Is now we're in summer, even though the first day of summer was just the other day. These are our longest days of the year, but this is when our salvias and our lantanas, yuccas are in big bloom, agaves have bloomed out, crepe myrtles are in full bloom, the vitex just bloomed, catalpa trees, those are a great option. So now you're going to have your big pop of color in summer, so you can still have that in the heat of the summer. By the time you move past summer and we hope for a really cool fall, you can start having the fall color. So your big trees and some smaller shrubs, you've got the autumn color of maples, Chinese pistache are a great fall color. There's a shrub called burning bush, and that'll turn vibrant orange red in the fall. Of course, this all just depends on how our weather goes in North Texas, but usually you'll see a consistent something turns colors, and something will give you that fall color. And of course, that's what everybody wants out of their nice deciduous trees. And then by the time you jump to true winter, as we go to December, January, February, you could still have things with pop of color, which means your holly bushes, which have like a red berry on them. That's a great fall color that kind of is inviting to the Christmas season. You got possum haw trees, which are similar looking to a holly tree, that drop all their leaves, but they get a vibrant red berry in the winter as well. So they are big pop of color. You could also have some of your annual color. You can still have annual color in the winter when you do your pansies, your winter kale, your cabbage. Those are still great color, and actually a lot of those will stick around even through March. If you're planting sometime in November and they get rooted in, if we don't go 10 days with negative degree weather again, you can kind of fight it that way. But I think you can even have snapdragons. Snapdragons is a great one because that comes in a lot of different colors. So that gives you a lot of different options that you can still use a lot of different color throughout the year. And I think we have every one of these options for different colors. So the items that'll bloom later, they may not look like much now, but they have a blooming season, they have a flowering season. We just have to coordinate that into the landscape. Hopefully all of this makes sense so far and kind of goes from there. Kind of an extension onto landscape as well is hardscaping. Um, Hardscaping can cover a lot of sects as well when you talk about what color mulch you use. So some people like black mulch, some people like red mulch. It's always an aspect to consider. If you have landscape beds, do you like an edging? Some people like a natural edge. There's also steel edging. There's a product we call Benda board, which is a fabricated board that pretty much lasts a lifetime that comes in a couple different colors. Some people are in love with stonework. So I think edging has a use and an aesthetic. So the use is I want to keep all the grass out of my beds. The aesthetic is the color, whether it matches the house, your landscape, however you want to use it. Hardscape also includes river rocks, accent boulders. A lot of people, we use it a lot that we'll use sections of river rock just to give it a good natural tone. There's river rocks and all around here as well. We've got the little gravels and everything. Sometimes that goes really well in certain spots. Some people have done river rocks all over their beds, thinking that has solved their maintenance problem, but nothing is truly zero maintenance. There's still going to be some little weeds in there that you're going to have to pick out. It does make it a little bit easier. And the good part about gravel is it's one time and it's done. Mulch you have to replace a couple times. But some people, it can feel like a little bit too much hard on the gravel portion. You also have accent boulders. Those boulders, larger boulders. Some people like the sandstone boulders. Some people have collected river rocks and boulders from their vacations and they place them in their landscape, and it's just an odd to me that they brought that back from somewhere else in this country or somewhere else in this world. I've even seen the petrified wood pieces that people will have, and I just think it's a great accent piece. And the best part about hardscape options is they never change size, they never grow, so it's one less thing that you'll have to consider maintaining. You might have to move it a little bit, you might have to shift it, but you don't ever have to trim it, you don't ever have to fertilize it. So it's a good piece that just adds a different contrast to the plants or to anything else. You could also consider pottery. We have a lot of pottery options here as well, but pottery is a good way to even replace your anchor pieces maybe at the front door. A lot of people have done pottery at front doors. Same aspect. The pottery does not grow. It is just there. But you can fill that with your thrillers and your spillers and your fillers to get different textures. You can change it up every year. You can do whatever you need to do because it's a great option for the perennials. It's a great option for the annuals. And the pottery comes in different colors. It comes, if you really want to switch it out, but maybe you don't. But altogether, it's a great way to change up the focus while adding in natural living things and your hardscape options to do it that way. So you can always combine these things. And again, with landscape, there's so many different ways you could go. And I think the best thing about all the landscape options is how unique you can go. So if, in North Texas, we might have a section of plants that we use because it does get pretty hot here. But we do have a lot of options for you to mix it up. So I hope I showed enough kind of layering options here. And again, these are all hardy plants for this area. A lot of it's still flowering out for summer right now, and they are cold and heat tolerant for this area depending on how you use them. And I think I don't know if I want to extend beyond that because I don't want to give too much information and overload everybody. So if we want to continue with any questions or anything, we can go from there. Which one? This one? This is a blush pink Nandina. This is one that it's evergreen, so it's mainly going to be green like this during the hot time of year, and then as you get to winter, it's going to change a lot of its color to more of an orange-red color. We have about, I think, 6 different varieties of Nandinas here, different sizes and different textures, but they all do a little bit of a color change in the winter. I think we have Firepower and Flirt, Obsession, so many different options, and I think we have one that gets a little bit larger, but most of them are going to stay under 2.5, 3 foot. It's a great layering option. It's not necessarily your background layer, it's your middle layer. but you can still use it as an under canopy. It can do full sun and then not full shade, but part shade. It still needs some sunlight. It doesn't get any flowers or any seeds or anything. This is pretty much how beautiful it's going to look. I can. Pruning just kind of goes into what you've planted. When we do new landscapes, we don't suggest a lot of upfront pruning unless you just feel like one branch is going crazy. We like to leave things alone for the first year and then start general pruning from there. Whether you do formal pruning of cutting straight edges or nice and round, that's all a flavor thing. That's where landscape design goes more into a really deep form, space, shape. There's a lot of contrast to it because they all have different names of style. And sometimes it just depends on how fast things grow. Like, I like the Sunshine Ligustrum. It's probably one of the top plants from the last 2 years. This thing goes four foot fast. And it's not something that can necessarily be rounded out into a perfect ball because it is used more as something natural. If you wanted to do something like a boxwood, that's going to be something more formed round. This is just a great plant because it's easy to maintain if you do want to train it, train it up kind of a little bit, but it doesn't make a mess. It doesn't drop its leaves in the winter, and it's just a great color. This may not be a great color in front of like a light colored cream house because that yellow doesn't pop as much, but against a darker fence or a darker brick, it pops really well. And then when you're adding in other colors, like of a darker color, these two just help each other pop a lot. And you could use about anything. Even when I put like a blue flower in front of it, it helps you see that color a lot more. So it's a great background plant. We've used them in open areas. We've used them as base plants. It's just a great way to get different colors to pop. And I mean, I think this has only been around for 5 or 6 years, but it's probably one of the top sellers. We have to bring them in pretty often, and I don't know if the growers can even keep up. Hopefully that answered some of the questions. I don't know if I want to go too much into pruning because that's a deep hole to go into pruning. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other?
We are blessed with wonderful clay soil.
Of course.
And we are putting planting soil
Mm-hmm.
over it. But for a shrub like that, how deep do we have to go with planting soil?
I think our biggest concern when we talk about clay soils is the nutrition that the plant is getting, and then also your water retention, because it can go both ways. Sometimes you can have gaps in that soil where the water goes straight through, but clay soil more has tendency to be like a clay bowl and hold water underneath the plant. So we usually recommend going at least, you don't have to excavate all of that soil, but tilling in up to 6 inches of something new so it can get proper nutrition, and at least up top it can have well-drained soil. So if we happen to get a rain and then your sprinkler goes off, water isn't just sitting underneath the plant, because you can't see down deep inside underneath the plant, and that plant could be drowning, which is causing root rot, which is causing the plant not to thrive as much as we should. So when you're reading on the tag and the tag says, oh, this plant can go 5 foot tall and mine only goes 3 foot tall. Well, a lot of it has to do with our weather and our soil. And so that means when it says it goes 5 foot tall, that means in optimal conditions. Now, North Texas doesn't necessarily have optimal conditions. If you wanted to go a whole foot deep and amend all the soil and get new soil, power to you, but usually it's like, where am I going to put all this soil? What am I going to do with all this clay soil? We usually do a lot more excavating when we find there's a lot of rock, because if it has nothing to root into at all, the tree or the plant just sits stagnant. And we've taken out plenty of old trees from customers where the tree has been there 2 or 3 years, and I can go and I can just lift it out. And the tree is still alive, but it hasn't grown any extra new growth or hasn't put on much growth because it's just sitting stagnant on top of rocky soil. So we really have to consider how far down we're going. Usually we're going to go upwards of 6 inches. I've seen people go deeper, but I think when you start basing it on what your more specialty items need, like if you are going to plant hydrangeas or if you are going to plant some more tropical style plants, they're going to want more of that lush acidic soil that's well drained so they're not going to drown. Does that kind of make sense? Okay. I know that it could seem like a backbreaker thinking about what am I going to do with all this soil after I take it out, or I've got to take a big tiller. We've taken tillers on certain properties and it just bounces on top because it's not even heavy enough. Or North Texas, and we've gone to houses 2 miles apart, totally different soil amending because just North Texas is so spot different. If you go to South Fort Worth, there's a black gumbo soil that is just, I mean, it comes out black. And then up here we have more limestone, kind of that tan brown that is, you can excavate it, but when I put water on top of it when it's dry, especially this time of year, the water doesn't even soak in, it just runs off. So it's almost making it a compacted concrete, if you want to call. So that's where you talk about amending, and sometimes that amending takes more than once. That if you've got to go in and add, after a few years of your plants being there, and add some more planters mix or azalea mix just to add nutrition to the soil, that's a smart way to go as well. Good? Makes sense? Okay. Other questions?
What kind of soil do you put into the base before you...
Depending on how deep you're going, if you're going deeper, I don't suggest just doing a straight compost or planters mix. You still need something that's a little bit heavier. So that's going to be like a sandy loam or a topsoil. And that's going to be, if you are going to go 12 inches or deeper, that sandy loam topsoil is going to help keep stability at the bottom. And then as you get higher into your layers, you can go with more the planters mix and the compost. We even have a raised bed mix in bags that you can use as well. And then if you want to, top it off with some azalea mix, or we have zoo poo, we have all kinds of top layer options, especially when you talk about smaller perennials and annuals that don't get as deep of roots. Those are really going to enjoy that top layer to get more blooms and to really fashion out what you really want it to do. And we sell that topsoil as well. The topsoil is in bags and the topsoil is in bulk. But it's kind of a sandy loam compost mixture.
We're just starting doing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the fence behind it. But I was just wondering, do you really want it in trees?
Yeah.
So would you do something like this, or how many do you do?
So you're talking about like an 8-foot bed area,
Yeah.
and then it's just open. I mean, this is always a great option. Now across an 8-foot area, you may not be able to fit more than 3. Is like a
I mean, it's 8 by 8, but it's 60
Yeah.
square feet. So I'm just thinking about.
depending on how it's facing. So if you're talking about a square kind of 8-foot area that's looking, the part that faces you, this always makes a great background towards the back of the bed, and then you can start layering forward from there. Or if it's kind of a 360 area, you could start from the middle as just something as a color base in the middle if you wanted to do 1 or 2 of these in the middle, and then almost, I mean, I don't know if this is a square or circle, however you want it, and then work, like, tier yourself down from there. What you don't want to do is distract from the flow of everything else. You still want it to kind of guide you through the rest of the yard, or if you have any other landscape next to that, you still want it to flow, because despite everybody wanting to make like this one big focal point, if you focalize on one 8x8 area in a bigger area, now you feel like you've shortened yourself to just this small area, while your backyard or your front yard might be 120 feet across, and your yard is so much more than that. And whatever you might have existing out there as well, you might coordinate the color scheme with the rest of it so it still flows that way with the color that way. So if you have some yellow or green options farther down in the yard, if you want to match that, that's a great way to do it. So it kind of feels like it was done purposely to coordinate, or maybe it kind of gives that, even if you did them 2 years apart, it gives you that idea, oh, these were done at the same time, and we jumped in on this adventure at the same time. Does that make sense? Okay, good. I just want to make sure like these words are coming out correctly. So, but yeah, just kind of getting a sense of how it fits in. Even if you wanted to, I mean, we have enough space here, so if you think about what an 8x8 area is, if you wanted to pull some plants out of a certain section and just set them out and see how they look together, you can plenty do that here. But I think we have enough space on the 6 acres we have out here to do that. So anything else, or were there any online questions? Or okay, good. Anything else? Am I running out of time? Am I too fast? I don't know. Okay, well, I thank you for everybody for coming out, and thank you for watching online. If y'all have any more questions, you can always email and go from there. Thank y'all.